President Obama has announced his new budget. There's some good news and some bad news in it. First of all, here's a piece of bad news. And they brag about this all over TV over the weekend. For every dollar there is in possible tax increases, there's $2.50 in spending cuts. So there's so much more spending cuts, and somehow this is a balanced budget. Like, it's supposed to be a balanced approach, I should say, right? Like, hey, you know what? We raise tax on the rich, and then you guys have to take, the middle class has to suffer a little bit too. No, even if President Obama gets his way on taxes, which there's no way he will, the middle class has to pay 2.5 times more than the rich. So this is the thing that Obama brags about. And of course, the Republicans say is nowhere near good enough, right? All right, now, having said that, there are some good parts of the bill. Defense gets cut by $487 billion. Don't be too excited by that, because a lot of that is because they're winding down the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So, those victories are not exactly as they appear. Medicare gets cut by $360 billion. Well, that's not really a good sign. They say it's coming mainly from providers and not the actual patients. That's better, I guess, but ultimately I'm afraid it's going to come from the patients anyway, so that's not good news. But the farm subsidies are taken out at $278 billion. That's very good news. Those farm subsidies were nonsense to begin with, and it's great to see them go. Now, they have some additional spending to spur on the economy here. That's also good news. $30 billion to modernize schools, that's great. $30 billion for teachers, police, firefighters, to make sure that their salaries are kept up and that they're not fired. You got over $140 billion for research and development. That will help the manufacturing industry and, of course, jobs. And then finally, you've got $476 billion for a transportation reauthorization bill. Now, there's a great deal of problems in that bill, but at least it's an investment in transportation within the budget. So I guess overall that's good news. Now, how about those tax cuts or tax increases? I mean, we're supposed to raise money, right? In fact, they say through these unspecified tax reforms, we will raise $1.5 trillion and use that towards deficit reduction. Okay, look, I'll take $1.5 trillion. It's not bad, right? That sounds good. And there is some good news about the tax reform. So apparently, President Obama is saying that dividends should be treated as regular income for for families making over $250,000. So instead of paying 15%, they'd be paying the regular top rate, which is 39.6%. Well, that makes all the sense in the world, because dividends are basically, when you take money and you invest it, you press a button, and it gives you a dividend back at the end of the year, depending on what stocks you bought, et cetera. It's not like you put on a hard hat and you go to work and then so why should it? It's not that there's anything wrong with making dividend income. It's that there's no reason that they should be charged a much lower rate of 15%. So if he can get that through, that would be terrific. I'm a little skeptical that he will, but at least he's proposing it, so that's a good thing. Now, that would raise over $206 billion in extra revenue. And there's another 3.8% tax on unearned income for couples earning over $250,000 because of the health insurance plan. That's also a good thing. He's pushing for the Warren Buffett rule, which would mean any money over $1 million would get taxed at a minimum of 30%, no loopholes. That would be great. And then for private equity managers, basically this idea of carried interest, they would go up from 15%, which is outrageous again, to the regular tax rate according to their bracket, which is, of course, the top bracket. So that's all the good news. Now you want to hear the bad news? They would lower corporate taxes. Now, wait a minute. The thing is, we're trying to fix the budget, right, and lower the deficit. If you lower corporate taxes, you will increase the deficit. So why is it part of this deal? Well, it's part of this deal because it's what the business community has always wanted. It's part of a compromise that President Obama wants to do, because he always wants to do compromises. And he needs to raise money for his campaign. Oh, did I say that out loud? So, this morning, Jim Cramer goes on Morning Joe. And before I had read the details of the budget, I thought this was curious, because here's Cramer saying that the business community all of a sudden is kind of interested in Obama. Let's watch.
Business leaders, I find, really like Mitt Romney a lot, and they get him. But they're alone. Well, business leaders see that he created some companies. Business leaders recognize that he would encourage hiring. But I've got to tell you, no one's that as enthusiastic as I thought they would be. And people are starting to talk about Obama.
You're saying even in the business community?
No, they used to be, but now they feel that, well, hold on, it's a social issue thing. We don't really care about that. Some of our wives, some of our husbands care about social issues.
Right.
That's not the focus. The focus is job creation. What happened to that debate?
All of a sudden, the business community is interested in Obama again. That's really interesting how that works. When he said he would lower corporate taxes. That part of the proposal is apparently going to come out later in the month. Inside administration officials confirming it. What is it going to go down to? It's going to go down from 35 to what they say is the high 20s. Of course, the Republicans want to go down to 25%, so my guess is it'll be closer to 25%. Funny that in the midst of all of these cuts, including by a 2.5 to 1 margin, if you believe them, and all those tax increases go through, which I don't believe for a second, the middle class gets hurt the most. But look at that, corporations win again. I wonder if unlimited corporate spending is having any effect on the politicians.